Are you looking for new books to read? Do you like finding a new special author? Are you tired of the same old books from the same old authors? Well then, welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where you can hear from fantastic new authors. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have worked hard to write great new books. Hear about their book and why you should check it out. So sit back and listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
Okay. Well, Jimmy, welcome to Discovered Wordsmith Podcast. It's great to see you on a day that is not Saturday.
Yeah, thanks. It's an honor to be on your show, Stephen.
Cool. Great. All right. Well, you know what? I know a little bit about you, but most everybody else doesn't. So tell us a little bit about Jimmy, where you live and some of the things you like to do that aren't writing.
Yeah, I live in the Columbia River Gorge. It's basically the land along the river separating Oregon and Washington, about an hour east of Portland. It's a really beautiful area. And we moved here a few years ago, and I built a house on some land, so that's where we live. And when I'm not writing, I am mostly building things. I'm a carpenter, a woodworker. And so that's me right now.
And in our Saturday mastermind group that we're both in, you've shared some wonderful pictures of a sauna and a garage or a shed, I believe.
Yeah. I've been working on this sauna. It was going to be a small, kind of inexpensive thing. But then, like so many things in my life, I end up making them bigger, longer, and more expensive than originally intended. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping to be done with the sauna in a few weeks. Yeah. Well, to have a writer's retreat here and use it.
Nice. Yes, there you go. I got my little cabin. People said, hey, we could have a writer's retreat. I'm like, yeah, like 3 people could fit in it. It's really a small cabin, but we need to do both sides of the country.
Absolutely. Yeah, not enough things happen on the West Coast.
Right. That's very true. Very true. Okay, so why did you want to start writing? What made you start?
Well, I could make a really long story short. I think that when I was about 12 years old, I started my first novel. I remember it was a yellow notebook paper, and I was using a pen with purple ink that was devoted to this one novel. And I got about 30 pages in. It was basically Jean-Claude Van Damme's Cyborg. That was basically the story. But
Got it.
Was, with my own spin. And I got about 30 pages in, and I realized I didn't know how to proceed. So I ended up dropping it. But it's interesting because for the next maybe 2 or 3 years, I felt bad for stopping it. It was lingering in the back of my mind a lot. But, when I was about 14, I'd been playing guitar for about a year. When I was 14, I realized that I was a songwriter. And that conviction started when I was about 14. And I knew that I was suited for it. I enjoyed it. I could spend all my time doing it. And really, for the next 7 years, that was my primary focus in life, really. It was just songwriting, learning how to be a better songwriter and performer. I was in bands. We played shows in Portland. And I wasn't, it's interesting because in people's teenage years, they have identity crises and try to figure out what they want to do as, they're 18, 19. I had none of that. I knew from the age I was 14 that I was a songwriter, period. But when I was about 21 years old, I started losing my hearing. And it wasn't nerve damage because it was intermittent. It was as if the middle ear was clogging up, but it'd make it so that I couldn't make out tones. And I went to doctors, and nobody knew exactly what it was. But for about the next year, as this was happening, it was getting progressively worse. It was pretty serious identity crisis for me, in terms of how I was going to interact with the external world, which until then was through songwriting. That's how I saw myself. And so I realized that I wasn't really going to be able to do this anymore. Um, I'd also been studying North Indian classical music also up to this point for about a couple of years before that, sitar and raga singing. And I wasn't able to hear the tones anymore, really. And so, so this was the first huge crisis when it came to identity in that sense for me. Um, so at one point, I thought,
Yeah.
okay, well, what's, what why why did I want to write songs? What were the impulses behind my songwriting? What was I trying to do? And I pondered this for a while, and I eventually realized that at the most irreducible impulse at the foundation of my desire to write songs was a desire to reflect my experience of being human, to reflect my experience of the world to the world. And that was just this irreducible impulse. And so then I started thinking, well, is there another way that I could do that? And I was thinking of different art mediums. And by the way, that irreducible impulse to reflect my experience of the world isn't inherently musical. So I thought that, well, maybe I could pick up some other medium. And at that point, I started thinking about the kind of magic I experienced reading Anne Rice's novels. And I realized that it seemed to me that she had reflected her experience of the universe in this kind of ineffable way that I thought that I had always wanted to do through songwriting. And so I thought, well, maybe through novels I could do that, like she has. And so I, started trying to write a novel. This was like 2001, 2002. And started trying. I got about maybe 40 pages in this time, not using a purple pen, but still got about 40 pages in. And again, I reached that same point when I was about 12 years old. I didn't know how to proceed. And about that same time, my hearing came back. And so I just dove right back into music. Never really understood why my ears had been getting plugged up, but whatever. My hearing was back, and that was good enough for me.
Wow.
So then I spent about the next 5 years just obsessively writing songs and playing in bands. And then in about 2007, my band and I reached this point where it was like a good stopping point. We had played a lot of places, or there was a decision as to whether or not to just continue what we were doing, or start touring. And we were all just in a place where we'd kind of accomplished our goals, and so we just decided to stop the band, and it felt like a good decision. But after that, I had to decide what to do next. And I started thinking about 2012, the Mayan calendar, because people were starting to talk about that around 2007, about 5 years before that. And I thought,
Right.
what if I wrote a novel that was about the 2012 Mayan calendar ending, and I have about 5 years to get it published, plenty of time, right? And so I started outlining this novel, but something interesting happened, which in the process of trying to think of the story just exploded in my mind. And, just all the dynamics of characters just really unfolded in my mind. And it was a similar kind of creative, like ecstasy almost, as I would get with songwriting sometimes. And so, I thought that I was on a good path, that was, a indication that maybe I should do this. That was about 2007, 2008. And I got about 150 to 200 pages in over the next few years before I think as soon January 2012, I had a couple hundred pages, and I realized I was only a quarter of the way through the story. And it's that same exact feeling as when I was 12. So when I was 21, I didn't know how to proceed past this point. I didn't understand why. And it was then, right around maybe the middle of 2012, that I discovered Larry Brooks's book, Story Engineering. And that completely changed my world when it came to writing novels, because I could see exactly what I had been doing wrong, since the age of 12, really, what elements a novel needed, generally speaking, how it could be thought of in 4 acts or 3 acts or whatever, and the need for an antagonist of a certain kind of power to match the protagonist. Like, all of it came together, and I was like, this is why I haven't been able to do it. So I finally felt like I had like real tools, but I had about 6 months left to write my 2012 book about the end of the Mayan calendar, and I knew that wasn't going to happen, and so I just killed that draft. So for the next year after that, I practiced. I did short stories. About 2013, I came up with another story that I really fell in love with, and spent the next maybe 2 or 3 years writing that before I finished the rough draft. But at that point, that was about 2016. We bought land here. I started building this house, and I didn't write at all. But in 2019, at the beginning, like January, I joined Jay Thor's mastermind group. And that was, again, another like real game changer for me. So over the course of that year, 2019, being part of his group, I think I published 2 short stories. And then by the end of the year, I published that novel that I had started a few years back. So that's a little, that's basically my, and since then, since 2019, I've published a couple more short stories and then a nonfiction with Jay Thorn.
Right. Okay. So that's a whole lot. I mean, I'm listening to your story. That probably would have like turned some people like, well, I can't do this. I'm losing my hearing. I can't write. But you didn't. So that's there's a lesson right there. At 12, you ran into the problem a lot of writers run into. I don't know what to do next. Where do I go? How did this story proceed? And a lot of writers have that problem even after they've written a book or two, and you kept going. I think that's an important thing for people listening to understand, because I think a lot of people have hit that same problem. I don't know what to do next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it feels like an
So
intractable problem. It feels like a mystery, but there actually are mechanics that can be learned about the craft that can help you through that.
yeah, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you had writer's block," and I think I've been hearing more and more people say that's a fallacy. People make that up to make themselves feel better. You've got to figure out what's wrong and fix it. So the fact that you read the book on the mechanics, and now you're in the mastermind group and have been finding the tools you need to move on. I think that's a great lesson for everybody. But losing your hearing when you're a songwriter and a musician, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm losing a little bit here, my hearing now, because of my age and too much rock and roll when I was younger. But right at the age of 20, when you're looking to be a musician and you're hearing, how did you get through that? I mean, seriously, that probably would have had some people on the brink.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it was devastating. I I had been for the couple of years before that, when I was about 19, I started what was for me a pretty like serious and focused spiritual practice. And so it was kind of interesting, because when I was 21 and this hearing problem started to happen, this whole identity issue, I actually did have some tools to use it as a lesson, that, I am not my writing, I am not my songwriting, rather. I am not my hearing. It was a devastating and painful thing to have happen, but people go through a lot worse. Um, and I can still use my legs. Some people can't do that. What do they go through? But they are not their legs, and they learn that. And so it was,
Right.
it wasn't as serious as that, but I think it was a really good early lesson as to what I am and what I identify with.
Nice. Okay, so you've been doing writing through the mastermind group, some short stories, other stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you are working on. What book? What do we have to look forward to from you in the future?
Yeah, well, right now, I have my novel out there, and also, I really like the nonfiction book that I did with Jay Thorne as part of his 9 Things Career Authors Don't Do series, and this one is on self-actualization. And so these are kind of the two works that I'm somewhat proud of out there. Right now, I am struggling to finish this big nonfiction work about Chinese medicine, uh, and how the energetic functions that are used in Chinese medicine relate to group dynamics, which is so it's sort of an idea that is not popular. It's kind of a new idea, and so I've been working on that for a long time, and I'm hoping to have that published in the coming months. We'll try to get it done this year. I'm not sure if it's going to happen. Right on the heels of that, I have a few novels outlined. Um, they're thriller novels in the vein of Jack Reacher, but there's a supernatural element. So, yeah, those are the books that I'm working on right now.
Okay, and so you're working on multiple projects, multiple things you're doing, and it doesn't sound like you're like, okay, I've got one series and that's all I'm going to work on. I've got to get 10 books out. And you've got a little bit here, a little bit there, which is a slightly different approach than a lot of authors, but it seems to work for you. Do you agree?
Well, I think that if you needed to make a full time income from writing, then you probably, you know, couldn't do what I'm doing, which is leisurely writing books, um, going where the spirit moves me, sort of. I make a full time living from building houses, and and I have to steal time away from the day to have time to write. And so it makes it more difficult in that sense, but it's also a luxury in that I don't have to make money from writing right now. I know that I'm not going to want to be building houses, into my 60s, and so hopefully by then I'll be really good at writing and be able to make a little bit of money from it.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great. And I think it's interesting too that you are writing some nonfiction books. Again, not one topic. You've done some books that help with writers. You've done books with your self-help, medicinal, health type things. So, and then we've talked before in the TASM group, you should do a woodworking book or a book on, building and stuff like that, since that's very knowledgeable for you. So it's kind of all over, but that's also the great thing about writing is there's not one thing to write. There's so many things. I've got probably 3, 4 different things myself. And I think that's
Hmm.
great. Someone like you showing, yes, you can write other things.
Yeah, life is short, and you got to do the things that you feel called to do. If you have the luxury to do that.
Right. Now, your the book you did with Jay, the writers series, the 9 things. What type of feedback have you been getting from that?
It Surprisingly good. It doesn't have a ton of reviews on Amazon, but I know a lot of people who have read it, and and that was a strange project because he asked me if I would write a book in the series, perhaps having to do with Eastern philosophy. And I thought about that for a while. And I thought, that seems pretty specific. I don't know a lot of authors are going to resonate with that. And so we instead came to the idea of self-actualization just in a kind of generic sense. And I still felt uncomfortable because what the hell do I know? What do I have to teach about this? And so I decided to just stick to what I know to be true and that I've kind of verified for myself. And then, there are about 9 essays in that book, and each one kind of uses metaphor and images to try to convey something that I know to be true for myself. And so, yeah, there's been really good feedback from from the few people I know who have read it.
Okay. And what about your the fiction that you've got? Well, you said you have a book done, fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, the novel has had
What's that called?
also surprisingly good feedback. That's called The Derelict Divine. And my fiction author name is
Okay.
James R. Essien, as opposed to Jimmy Essien, which I do for nonfiction. And yeah, that has a few reviews on Amazon, and I've gotten some good feedback. I learned a lot writing that book, and so I'm really excited to write another novel. Where I can hopefully it doesn't take me years to write. I don't think it will.
But saying that again right there, pointing out, you're not stopping with one book. I think
Mm-hmm.
you've probably run into this too. A lot of authors have it in their head. Oh, I wrote my book. I'm on easy street. I know how to write. I wrote a book. It's going to be popular. I'm going to be famous. But you get better with each book. Obviously, this book was finished, so it was better than that book you started with 30 pages at year 10 years
Mm-hmm.
old.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's probably something to be said for rewriting books also, because I rewrote this particular novel over the course of a few years, maybe like 4 times, like 4 or 5 times. And, I felt like I was learning with each of those.
Yeah, I agree. I've done that too. I found that editing, at least at this stage, for me, editing teaches me a lot more. Because I can find the things that need to get better, and then I get
Hmm.
better for with every rewrite to a point.
Hmm.
So your fiction book, um, would you rather have it be a movie or a TV show?
uh, I suppose a TV show. Um, I don't watch many movies or TV shows anymore. I just got out of the habit of making time to do that. I kind of fill every day just full of projects, and by the time like 8 p.m. rolls around, I'm exhausted. But I have a huge list of movies and TV shows that I've just missed over the last 5 or 6 years. But it seems like you can do pretty amazing character development and story evolution with TV these days.
Right, I agree. I agree. I think my son keeps predicting that movie industry is going to decline again, and because of all the great TV shows that streaming services are offering.
Hmm.
So we'll see what
Hmm.
happens.
Hmm.
Uh, so Jimmy, um, what are some of your favorite books and authors that you like to read?
Oh, yikes. Well, I guess I would go with the two most influential on my fiction writing are Anne Rice, which I mentioned previously, and second would be Haruki Murakami. Um, it was really, in 2007 when I'd given it, a real shot trying to write a novel. Maybe it was like 2008 or so. I read Haruki Murakami's Hard Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. That's the name of the novel. And again, I was just blown away by what can be conveyed through that medium. And it really inspired me to learn how to do something similar. So those two, Anne Rice and Haruki Murakami. But I listen to audiobooks every day. I just have hundreds upon hundreds of audiobooks in my library on Audible. And so I have a lot of favorites. Jack Reacher, of course, is great. And I've been making a study of his books. I've read most of those more than once uh, for my own thrillers coming up. And so I really like those. But there are very many. Actually, one that I just reread that I think everybody should check out is not very well known. Peter Watts, I believe, is the author, and it's sci-fi, hard sci-fi. It's called Blind Sight. I actually reread it recently because they're going to turn it into a movie. So it's worth reading that book before the movie comes out. Or maybe it's a TV show. I don't know.
Okay. All right. I'll make sure and put some links to those in the show notes. Um, and do you have any local bookstores that you like to go to in your area?
Uh, Short answer, no. But, I grew up near Powell's Books in Portland. So, we would, in high school, we would skip school and go hang out at Powell's, which is kind of ironic. But, yeah, Powell's Books was a fixture for me growing up. And, I loved Borders. I was so sad when Borders closed in 2008 or 2009, whenever that was. But, I don't really do the bookstore thing anymore. Right. It's kind of sad.
Okay. All right. So before we wrap up our discussion about your book and move on to some author type things, tell everybody listening your nonfiction book with Jay and then your fiction book, your thriller, why people should look into getting each one of those.
Well, the nonfiction, 9 Things Career Authors Don't Do, self-actualization. It's really for authors, that entire series. Authors who are stuck or who need to learn about specific aspects of independent publishing. And he covers a really wide array of topics with that series. Mine addresses more internal resistance and all of the typical forms of resistance most authors experience, and maybe like a way to reframe things so that you can move forward. So if you're interested in that, that's basically what it is. The novel, The Derelict Divine, I would say, I was aiming for it being a cross between Haruki Murakami and Anne Rice. And, I fell short, I think. But if you like either of them, you might like it. And I would say there's a philosophical bent to it, but it is... It's not a thriller per se. It's really more of a maybe like a psychological thriller / paranormal suspense.
Okay, great. Well, Jimmy, I appreciate you telling us about your books, talking with us about those today. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.